Good evening, everybody. Good to see a full house. Huge thanks to everybody who's taken the time and travel on the issues that matter to them. Come here to see Colchester City Council's cabinet representing the whole of the chamber as best we're able. So just give me a second. I think we're now clear. Some people delayed joining us who wanted to come to have your say, and we'll get to that before the urgent items. We'll just work our way through the business of the day. Okay. Right, so we've got the live streams on. Okay. Right, so welcome again. I'll have to say these things about if there's an emergency. Let's hope there's not. There are no practice alarms planned for this evening. But if an alarm sounds, please evacuate the town hall by going down the main staircase or the back staircase to the High Street and then to the car park behind the town hall in St Runwald Street. In the case of any disturbance which requires a cabinet to withdraw, and let's hope that's not necessary, councillors should withdraw to the Mayor's Parlour using the doors behind me and await further advice. This meeting is being streamed live over the internet on the Council's YouTube channel. Will also be available to listen to afterwards. Use of mobile phones and other devices, including cameras by visitors, is welcomed, but you're requested to use them discreetly and not to disturb the meeting, to set them to silent and not use voice or camera flash functions. Speakers are reminded that microphones are to be used at all times. Let me introduce the work of the Cabinet. We are the main executive body of the Council. Yes, we are responsible for day-to-day decision making on all Council services and make recommendations to full Council on major policy issues and on the Council's budget. The Cabinet's made up of 8 councillors, each of whom is responsible for a particular range of services. I'll introduce myself and ask my colleagues to do likewise. Around this table there's other supporting colleagues who I welcome here as well. So my name is Councillor David King, Leader of the Council, and I'll start at this end of the horseshoe and come round.
Councillor Natalie Summers, Community Portfolio Holder and Councillor for St Anne's and St John's Ward.
Councillor Michelle Burrows, Local City Councillor for Wivenhoe Ward and Portfolio Holder for Leisure, Culture and Heritage.
Richard Clifford, Democratic Services Manager.
Andrew Weavers, Head of Governance and Monitoring Officer.
I'm Donnelly, Chief Executive.
Good evening, everybody. Councillor Mark Corey, Resources Portfolio Holder and Representative of Wivenhoe Ward.
Councillor Alison Jay, Highwoods Ward and Portfolio Holder for Economy, Transformation and Performance.
Martin Goss, Neighbourhoods and Waste and Mile End Councillor.
We have 2 members of the Cabinet unable to join us tonight. One, Councillor Andrea Luxford Vaughan, is unwell. Another had a prior holiday arrangements and unable to join us, Councillor Smith. I'm going to change the order slightly because I want to respect the fact so many members of the public and fellow councillors are joining us. So what we'll do is do declarations of interest, and then we'll go to have your say, and then we'll go back to the mainstream business, starting with the urgent item we have tonight. So declarations of interest, Cabinet, have you any here on the business in question that you need to declare? No? Okay. Right. Have your say. I'll do it in that order, I think, or we'll do the administrative business afterwards. So I've got one on one of the items, but the general have your say. I've got, first of all, former councillor, I think it is Mike Hardy. If you'd like to come forward, Mike, if you wouldn't mind, you know this arrangement, I'm sure, very, very well. Please make yourself very much at home in your past place. Mike, you know the rules, I think. 3 minutes, and then we'll go for a reply and, if necessary, a response.
That's it.
Yeah, all right. Good evening, Cabinet. My subject is Gosbecks Archaeological Park, which was gifted to the borough in 1995 by a local farmer and landowner, together with a dowry of £500,000 for its maintenance, and archaeological development. It is a scheduled ancient monument of the late Iron Age. Since gifting, there has been negligible archaeological development by any administration, and both officers and past portfolio holders have been minimalist and unimaginative in this respect. During her 15 years service for Scrub End, former Councillor Pauline Hazel spoke frequently at Cabinet, Council and one-to-one with portfolio holders, seeking to have the wonderful story of Gosbecks, the Trinovantes, their leader Tunabellum, and our chariot-born warrior ancestors told comprehensively on site on interpretation boards. Her approaches were ignored. An opportunity arose 2 years ago when the Tories took control of the council, and she and I met the heritage manager of Colchester and Ipswich Museums, who has responsibility for these matters, and tabled a proposal for interpretation boards. He appeared to accept it with some enthusiasm, but control changed again last year, and the proposal has since lain dormant. So I bring to your attention that this worthwhile heritage project exists on a silver platter, so to speak, awaiting implementation. The project is costed in outline at about £5,000 for production and erection, which would be paid from the ring-fenced dowry and not by the taxpayer. Drafted for 4 large boards, mounted as a single display covering the pre-Roman and Romano-British periods, and is supported by existing artwork by the late Peter Frost and held by the Colchester Archaeological Trust. Finally, I point out that our heritage is much greater than just the Romans, and it began long before 43 AD. I am very happy to meet the portfolio holder to elaborate and provide any other information which may be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Mike. That was very understandable. Thank you. Very compelling, I think. Before I turn to the portfolio holder, for any remarks you might want to add, because as you will know, there is a shared passion cross-party, one administration to another. They come and they go, but as you say, our history goes back thousands of years, and why wouldn't we want to, at the very least, acknowledge it, particularly if there are, as you say, if this is a silver platter, if we have funds to one side. But regardless of that, there is a balance in all we do, and I'd hope that we could look at this very seriously and swiftly. Councillor Burrows, Michelle, is there anything you'd like to say?
Thank you. Thank you very much for coming today. It's very nice to meet you. I haven't been made aware of this before today's meeting, so I haven't got detailed information to give back to you. However, I will read what you've given to me very carefully. I would very much like to meet with you for further information. And I can say that at the next portfolio meeting, I can take this forward and discuss it with Frank Hargrave. We do have some work going on at Gosbecks. I do know that there have been some investigations. I take your point about it not just being Roman heritage that we have in Colchester. Excuse me, there are lots of interpretation boards that are going up around the city. For example, at St Michael's Church, just off of Mile End. Also on the 7th of September, there was an unveiling of a panel at the Roman Circus as well. So we are very much aware of the importance of promoting our heritage around the city so that everybody has an understanding of it. I totally take your point about Gosbecks, a very important area too. And as I said, I will read the information. I presume your contact details are available in the information, and I will get in contact with you and perhaps we can meet, and I will take it forward to the next portfolio holders briefing. Is that okay? Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Mike. Next, have your say, general have your say speaker is Mr. Kamal Gofuglu. I apologise, I haven't got that exactly right, Kamal. Please come forward. Thank you.
Dear members of the Cabinet, last year, in total, there were 21,285 crime incidents reported in Colchester. Colchester is now third most dangerous major town in Essex. Of this number, 9,089 of them were violence and sexual offences. A further 2,652 of them were antisocial behaviour, and 1,919 of them were public order offences. As of November 2023, compared to the national crime rate, Colchester's crime rate is at 126%. Colchester has the 20th highest crime rate out of 99 England and Wales postcode area. Considering the hostile environment fostered by government, with increases in hate crime, anti-Semitic, Islamophobic and transphobic attacks, does the Cabinet think one crime and disorder committee meeting per year is enough to heal wounds of many communities in Colchester and make our cities safe for residents and visitors? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kamal. I'm very happy to start and I'll go to the portfolio holder if I might. I had this morning the opportunity to listen to our district commander provide, I have to say, he's not here so he won't blush, a brilliant exposition of where we are in terms of the challenges today on crime, where we stand today in terms of the response to them. And there was a lot of reassurance in a very practical way about where the direction and trend is. And I know that portfolio holder, who will speak in a moment, has been very deeply involved in this. So I would just sort of say that the issue always with facts for any of us is that they inform, they should be part of the guidance and to frame a conversation. And that conversation, so I'll half answer, if I might, your central point. Half answer your central point, which is, does one committee panel do it? For those who were there, a very robust occasion, a very searching occasion, so it absolutely plays a vital part. But it's the work of the portfolio holder, our officers, the partnerships we have that are the heart of what we do. And you know, the way to look at this, non-politically, practically, is to say, where is the engagement? The answer is it's in many places, and it has to be, because it's about the sum of our knowledge and the sum of our responses to it. As I say, I see a lot that is encouraging, but I'll allow the portfolio holder, if she would, to elaborate and take that where she will. But thank you for the questions.
Hi, Kamal. Thanks for coming. Yeah, I do agree. I think there should be more crime and disorder committees. I believe we are having an extra one this year because at the last committee meeting, it was decided there needed to be further work done, particularly to set the strategic priorities of the Colchester Safer Essex Partnerships. But violent incidents with injury are down 2.8% at the moment, and violence without injury is down 4.8%. I think antisocial behaviour has fallen by over 30% as well since last year as well, and it's been falling year on year. There was a big spike during COVID, but even when you compare pre-COVID, I think we are still down on that. So things are getting better. Obviously, they're not perfect, but recently we've been doing a lot of work with the Safer Colchester Partnership and the police to team up with the wardens more efficiently, and we're getting more patrols put in, and we have heard from the Colchester Bid and various others that they have seen a big improvement, particularly in the city centre. So yeah, not resting on our laurels, but we are seeing improvements, and we hope to continue those. But I'm having regular meetings with our communities inspector, Jenna Merrington French, and also Colin Cox, and to keep on top of these issues and make sure we keep going in a positive direction.
Thank you very much. Just a couple of facts might be helpful. So Chief Executive reminded me, Kamal, that actually we have 2 regular last 3 years crime disorder panels. I think the next one is 18th of March. Is that right, Pam? So just we have the same sort of baseline in terms of information, not only have the statistical base, and what we might do is perhaps just forward to you, as I'm sure you will have a deep, genuine local interest in this, what the latest reports are that's available to us, because as I say, there can be a lag sometimes between some public sources and what we can access. So we'll see what we can forward, and the portfolio holder may be able to help you there, get a richer understanding of a more positive position than is sometimes portrayed. And to the facts, as I say, 2 crime and disorder panels. If you put to that the meetings like we had just a couple of months ago that Cabinet have, the engagement of the Chief Executive and the safety partnership in which the portfolio holder and others are engaged, there are legion ways in which we ensure that there is accountability and awareness. And I finish with just saying, as I did before, that it's the collective work. So it's our officers, our resources, the police service, engagement of business, just for a few examples, that make an effective partnership against crime. And there's a lot recently that we are hearing that says that the problems we may have had in spikes of PR, publicity, or truth or not is a debate to be had, but concerns that we had over the summer have been addressed as described by the portfolio holder with real vim and vigour and progress. I don't want to disquiet, but I think we made real progress. Anything else you want to add to that, Nad?
Just to say that, one thing is obviously please do keep reporting any crimes, because the police need the information. They can't always obviously act on every single crime, but if they hear about everything that's going on, it's not reporting on Facebook or things isn't the way to do it. You need to report online or call 101, and also join the Neighbourhood Watch. Graham, who runs the Neighbourhood Watch, he sends out a brilliant report every week. You can see exactly what's happening across Colchester, and also loads of great advice there on how to avoid crime and taking sensible precautions and everything like that. So I can give you his details if you'd like to.
No, thank you very much. The Chief Exec, as she does sometimes, Kamal, whispers in my ear. So there is a particular group which I'll ask Pam to talk to, because again, this is not just a conversation with you, you understand. This is broadcast and many members in this room. I want us to be as rounded as we can. Pam.
Thank you, Leader, and hello, Kamal, and thank you for bringing this to our attention. The reason I've asked to speak is because this is a subject very close to my heart. I had responsibility for this in my previous role before taking on the role of Chief Exec. I think it would be really helpful for you to be aware of the existence of a group called the Independent Advisory Group, which is a police-led group, but chaired by One Colchester Chief Executive Tracy Rudling. Now, it's long established, but in recent years it's taken on a particular role in making sure that any particular current community tensions are responded to. So faith groups are very well represented on that group, and minority groups, many of whom are sadly subject to hate crime. The police are always in attendance, and it's a really good framework for making sure that community tensions are responded to as and when they occur, as well as providing support at times of particular community stress. You may be interested in finding out a bit more about that and maybe even attending future groups. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kamal. Our third Have Your Say general subject speaker is Ali, I think it's Ali Wilkin. Ali, if you are, thank you. Let's make that possible. Thank you everybody for making space, as we should. Welcome, Ali. take your time to get yourself ready. You have 3 minutes. You'll hear a bell which tells you there's another minute to go at the close. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. There is a designation specific to child survivors of the genocide that is ongoing in Gaza. It's wounded child, no surviving family. That's no parents or siblings, no grandparents, aunts or uncles, no cousins, just one child who has been pulled from the rubble of a house where every generation of the family were huddled together when it was bombed. Their wounds can include crush injuries and limbs amputated, amputations done without anaesthesia. They may have phosphorus burns or head injuries. For the already disabled child, there are extra dimensions of terror. For all of them, they face further extra dangers, as each of them face a lack of water and access to basic hygiene. There's no proper food, and most of all, no peace. There is now an entire generation of disabled children in Gaza. Genocide experts are very clear that the necessary conditions exist to declare this ongoing bombing of Gaza a genocide. As such, at such a time as this, every voice raised to call for a permanent ceasefire and a halt to this bloodshed is both invaluable and necessary. On the 7th of December, Mark Gocher will be bringing a motion for you all to consider to vote for to call for a permanent ceasefire in Gaza. As a disability advocate and as a Christian, a disciple of Jesus who was a Palestinian, and as a human being, I urge you all to consider voting for that motion. It is not party political. Gloucester City passed a similar motion unanimously and is Conservative-led. You would also join Sheffield City Council, the Welsh Parliament and the Scottish Parliament. Thank you for hearing me today.
Thank you very much, Ali. I'll ask other Cabinet members if they want to say a few words. I will just say before we start, and then I'll go to those who do, and before I close in a slightly different role. So I want to talk personally, if I may. So first of all, thank you on behalf of all of us for taking the time and trouble to come and come into this room, which is not everybody's cup of tea, let's be honest. I hope you do feel some welcome, because genuinely you are welcome to come here, and you and colleagues are welcome, of course, to express your view as you have outside. So I just want to address that point, and then I'll ask for other views. So I spent 20 minutes outside, and several other councillors were there as well, trying to strike that difficult balance between absorbing the emotion and the feelings, which are intense, and trying to have a conversation in between the shouting, which is entirely okay, that had some constructive point to it. And I think it did, but when I walked away, I sort of could feel the emotional echo. So I just want to talk to that, if I might, on a personal basis, and as I say, I'll ask for colleagues to talk. No one with any kind of awareness could see anything other than the horror in what's happened, and I have to say this, without a comparison with the relative weight of it, both in Israel and in Gaza, it is beyond imagination of the darkest kind. And I know, and we've made that clear already across all of the political parties, the huge compassion and feeling and empathy we genuinely have, all of the parties, for those who are affected, both there and on the echo of those times and events elsewhere. So I'll come back to that at the close, but would colleagues like to have a word? Mark, I think.
Thank you, David, and thank you, Ali, for coming to speak, and thank you to those people outside as well, because it's absolutely important that people come and get their voices heard. We can hear them just about, and it's nice to know not all protest has been banned in this country. We absolutely have to keep that democratic right. So I did go outside and speak to people and absolutely listened and took the emotion that is there. Personally, absolutely support a ceasefire. Who in their right mind would not. I do not understand why some political leaders are not calling for that. Politically, we are a Liberal Democrat cabinet. The Liberal Democrat Party has said nationally they support a ceasefire and working towards the two-state solution. I think that the UN has been trying to call for a ceasefire and get leaders to actually support that, and I'm so surprised and let down by enough leaders who have not supported the UN with that. I'm not religious, and I'm driven just by the moral disgrace that we see, and I think many Israelis are not happy with Netanyahu, for example, and his way of reacting to the situation that happened on October the 7th. Now there's so much more of the history over the years, and we have to understand, many of us around this table, our ancestors, the colonial history of it all that has led to this position. Now, we don't have enough time to go to that, but I do study and teach history and fully understand where it's all come from. So I just want a ceasefire in order for the destruction to end, the killing to end, and for diplomacy to triumph. As I say, I'm not religious, but I'm losing faith that I did have in humanity to get round the table. And the way in which we see division in our society in the UK today is worrying, and in other countries. And the election of the latest right-wing dictator, sorry, he may become a dictator, but the Argentinian person, it worries me because it's sowing division. We need to end hate and division. We need to stop seeing increases of Islamophobia and anti-Semitism, which are being inflamed because of the situation that we see in the Middle East. So I will stop there, but I just wanted to thank you and give just some of my understanding and some of the political understanding of it from our point of view. Thank you.
Absolutely, and I think it's worth bearing in mind that for us, the ordinary people who are dealing with the emotional impact of this, because there are people out there that this affects directly, who have family, friends out there in Gaza. It hurts. Seeing a genocide of your people hurts, and then seeing your national leaders not listen to you, turn away from you, they've let us down. So there is a lot of emotion, yes, but then I would like to hope that if we'd have had smartphones when the genocide was going on in Serbia of the Bosniaks, that we'd have all been just as het up about getting it stopped more quickly then. And I think that there is a disconnect, partly because we can see it's wrong, it's just wrong, but politicians do politics, and there is a disconnect and there is a problem. Yes, I understand, sorry.
Thank you. Now, I wanted to give you the space to respond. Let me finish, unless there are other voices from Cabinet on behalf, our collective behalf. Please bear with me if I sort of say that we could have a technical, and it's a terrible thing to have, a technical discussion about definitions of genocide, but what we can all be agreed, as described, on the events and the horror they are bringing. Let me just talk to where we stand by convention. So I hear that one political party may bring a motion, and that's their right. The convention in my limited time has been that where it's been a national issue, should we say, or an international issue, remembering that we cannot directly influence these, on things that matter. Having a motion, having a discussion and debate is appropriate, whether we seek to agree on the terms on which such a motion might be expressed, because it has more impact and more effect. So the act of seeking some form of unity between the political parties, if a motion is going to be brought, is what I would, as leader of the council, be encouraging. And I'll take one other thing, if I might. which is where we do have an influence is locally, both in the way in which we deal with each other and in the help and support we provide every community. We said it out loud early in this conflict, want to be even-handed. We want to support every community and every faith. That's our job. We are a city of sanctuary. That is a cross-party view. We're touching on politics. Care about the people here. We do our utmost to protect them, and we work across the party lines because there are none on this who would not wish to look after all the communities in Colchester. So I will stop there. If I might take away what you've said and try to ensure, and I know other party leaders here are having those conversations, so we will see what we're able to agree upon. I think that's really important, but you can be sure from the reception you've had from those of us who are outside and those of us here that we really do have a heartfelt touch of understanding for the terrible times to which you and others refer, and we clearly hope for a peaceful resolution as soon as is able. I'll stop there. Andrew.
Yes, thank you, Leader. I thought I should just mention, as our speaker has mentioned, about a potential motion coming in. Just to confirm, we have received a motion from Councillor Gocher, and it's currently going through the validation process as per our normal process. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Right, thank you very much indeed to all our speakers. I know there's more to come on specific items, the first one of which is actually our urgent item, which is on pay. So the paper we've received has been issued just today around the pay award is an urgent report, given the need to resolve the pay dispute that we have following a vote for industrial action, and to ensure that staff receive the pay award that they're due for 2023-24 as soon as we're able. So Councillor Julie Young. Julie, do you want to talk to this before we have the conversation? Thank you.
Thanks very much. Good evening, Leader and Cabinet. Yeah, it's been a really tricky few days following the result of the ballot, but I'm really pleased that we may have found a solution to this year's pay round. And all I wanted to say, Leader, is I know that's been a really difficult time for our staff, and to thank those involved with the negotiations, and to thank representatives of Unison as well in those discussions. I think for me, this is the second year in a run that we've had this stance and come to a conclusion. Going forward, I think we should discuss with Unison how we can move towards a national pay deal, which would present a solution to this annual round of negotiation that we currently have. I hope we can get the payout to staff as soon as possible, hopefully for the December salary, but if not, arrangements are made to support our staff in what will for many be a difficult Christmas with the cost of living crisis.
Thank you very much, Julie. I'll pick that up when I talk through the paper. Right, so Cabinet, we have this urgent item. I want to thank the Chair of Scrutiny for agreeing that we take it without the usual prior notice and debate. Now, I want to take opportunity to also thank group leaders who I've done my best to ensure are inside that circle of discussion. We talked earlier about consensus where we can, so on matters that matter, and pay and terms and conditions for our staff matter too. So I want to thank, I can see Councillor Dundas here. Paul, thank you for allowing me and Julie to bend your ear and take your time at different moments. That's the Colchester spirit that we seek to apply to the things that matter most, that we accept the challenge and we welcome engagement across the aisle. Administrations come and administrations do go. All right, so to the paper itself. This records some of the facts and just briefly rehearse them. That pay awards are negotiated locally. That's not unusual, though fewer councils have that local pay arrangement. It's about a third in our part of the country. It's as much as 2/3 elsewhere, but mostly it is true that councils over time have taken the view that a national pay process, although it gives them less influence, is a better way of proceeding and avoids the annual dance to which Councillor Young referred. But there is no question, in my personal view, that that's the direction we should take. But that's not what is in front of us now. What's in front of us now is the National Pay Award, which is what's been sought, and as described in the paper, is what has been agreed. There is a significant cost, additional to cost, beyond the budget that was set by full council in February, some 600k in this, and the logic is in future years. We've agreed to do this. That confirmation, if you agree tonight, will allow the trade union Unison to go to their members, as we understand it, to recommend a settlement. We will deal with the future when we can, and I will really avoid any other comment on it's not necessary, other than to just sort of say, as staff know and Unison know, and members know, we have a dire financial situation in the council, not of our own making, but one we have to work our way through. Where we're heading, doing the right thing with our staff adds pressures to the challenge, but where we're heading is towards, in a consultative way, a smaller organisation, better paid, doing less and doing it well. That's going to be a difficult journey. It's going to require conversations across parties, it's going to require conversations with our staff, and it needs to be done in the right kind of spirit. With that context, I recommend to you, subject to any remarks or comments from colleagues, I go, first of all, thank you, Mark, I would want to go to you. Councillor Corey, now we'll go to close after you're spoken. Thank you.
Thank you, David. So because of the resources portfolio, I've been very much involved in this discussion, and David, you've given me room to do that, and as leader, you're absolutely vital to these discussions. I do want to start by saying thank you for the work you've done with staff, some staff here this evening, but then the work that Unison have done with staff as well. I think it has been a good discussion. It's been a negotiation, and Pam, as head of paid staff, has been involved with this, and Jess Douglas online for a number of months. And you'd expect that. You'd expect to find negotiations and trying to find the right balance. And again, David, your style of involving and talking to, when you say group leaders, just to make that clear for the public, that is different party leaders. So being cross-party in your updates and information to other leaders and other political parties to make sure that we do discuss this around the table, and we can all be supportive of our staff who do a really good job. We win awards, we are ambitious as a council, we do push our staff hard to deliver for our residents. You have said it, and I'll just repeat three main points. Councils across the country are struggling due to financial pressures. We have had a severe lack of funding from national government over the years. We have relied more on income that since COVID has struggled to come back, and the impacts of inflation, the impacts on housing and homelessness, which are seeing a massive cost pressure on our budget here in Colchester of almost £1 million, energy costs as well. So for those reasons, we do have to stop and check money goes in and goes out of the council, and that includes on pay for staff as well. However, personally, my heart absolutely goes out to supporting our staff as much as possible. As a teacher, I have been on strike earlier this year, and I do support the right for our staff to do that. They have been balloted to do that, but I would ensure that we get a settlement beforehand. This paper in front of us gets us to a settlement, but there will be consequences that when we have to pay out more to staff, we do have to look within the budget, where are we going to find that money in order to do that. So that's our challenge. We want to absolutely support our staff to do the great job they do for the residents of Colchester, but as politicians and as senior leaders, we have to also find where that money comes from. So we'll be doing that work. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other comments or observations from colleagues? Okay. Thank you for your thank yous to everybody here, to the staff, to the leadership, to Pam to my left, and those who have helped get us to this point of taking what was the best offer we could make to one that was acceptable to it would seem, to the trade union. And our thanks, as I say, to all of you for what would appear to be a conclusion. So, colleagues, as recommended in the paper, to apply the National Joint Council 1925 pay increase on all spinal column points, and then to fund this from the reserves to the terms described in the paper, the authority that we do have. Agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. We've done disclaimers of why you shouldn't be speaking on anything. So we go past that and go to the minutes of the last meeting, 11th of October. Colleagues, are we agreed on those?
Agreed.
Right, into really substantive extra business. We've been working up to this for a year. So the proposed future strategy for Amphora, I welcome the attendance of our colleagues from Amphora. Thank you for all you've been doing publicly and privately behind the scenes to develop a position that we can take tonight at Cabinet. Right, so we are asked to approve the proposed future strategy for Amphora as set out in the paper here, supported by the board of Colchester Commercial Holdings and as recommended by governance and audit. And as that alone tells you, there's been a great deal of collective cross-party intense work to ensure that we find the best way ahead that we could. This has been thoughtful. It's a response to a changed market and a changed environment in which our companies have to trade. And it's an acceptance of the limitations of the risks that the council should take when there are so many other pressures. The most important thing for me has been that it's been shaped the way ahead as described in the paper, with the benefit of not only those who run those companies, the fresh view of the interim MD, informed by that of the chief executive and many around this table, but by a cross-party challenge group, and as I've said here, through the proper process, in effect the scrutiny process of this council. I want to repeat all that's in the paper. It's a thoughtful one, it's well supported. I welcome any additional comments or views from colleagues. Thank you. But I should have done this, my apologies. Now is quite a good time to do it, is to ask colleagues who want to speak up on this issue to come forward. So Councillor Dundas and then Councillor Willett. So my apologies, Paul, in the sequence, but I've set the scene for you before you arrive and sort of say, oh no, let's go left or right. Over to you.
I think we can forgive you. You did steal a couple of my words though, so there we go. Good evening, Leader. Good evening, Cabinet. Thank you for your time. I generally do agree with the strategy set out in the paper, and that's the position of the Conservative group as well. I think if I have a criticism, it's probably that it's been quite a long time coming. I think the CIPFA report was in January, so it's nearly a year. That's a year of accrued costs, but there we go. And also just want to recognise that obviously there have been some very good and very dedicated people who have put a lot of work into these companies and projects. There have been some successes as well, which I'm pleased to see we're carrying on with and not throwing the proverbial baby out with the bathwater. So that's positive. I mean, I'll talk about Amphora Energy specifically on the next item. And I suspect, no doubt, there'll be further debates about the housing company to come. But all I really want to say on this item is that this really is a timely reminder that, you know, involvement in commercial ventures is risky. It does have a risk attached. And I know I've sort of banged on about it for years now and bored people to death, that I've always been very nervous of the way we used to put anticipated profits from commercial ventures into budget forecasts, into the medium-term financial forecasts. You have only made a profit once it's in the bank. And a commercial project has only been once successful once it's been completed and everybody's got paid. And so I don't like saying I told you so on that, well not a lot anyway, but I did tell you so. I told lots of people so. I've even told myself, and perhaps didn't have a lot of luck persuading people as leader of the council. But there we go. So all those dividends and profits which were sitting in the MTFF back to sort of 2017 have vanished. I said they might, and they have. So please, in the future, don't bank the profits until they're actually there. I think that's also very important when we're looking at any future or ongoing housing ventures, particularly large scale. You know, you have to remember that the developers who specialise in these sorts of 200, 300, 400 or whatever schemes don't always end up making money. What they do, they have several on the go at once. And they usually have some which make money, make more money than expected, and it all comes out in a wash and they make a nice profit and their shareholders are all happy. But if you're going to be a developer, even as a partner or whatever involvement you have of one-off large-scale developments, they are high risk. Things can and do go wrong. Costs escalate, economic conditions change. They always have, and they always will. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. But developing and commercial stuff is a calculated gamble. Obviously, that's why you have business plans. But it's in the gamble. It's always a gamble. That's why not everybody and every company succeeds. And if you look at the council's finances, can Colchester, the City Council, afford any gambles? I suggest it probably can't. So I'm sorry it didn't work out. I'm sorry for the people who worked hard on these companies. But please learn the lessons. Please accept the commercial world is different from local government. And we all need to make sure we don't make the same mistakes again. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Do stay there, because don't leave us that quick. So in return for me taking some of your words, can I say you're taking some of mine? And actually that's no bad thing, because you and I have talked personally and frankly about this, as you have in some of the sessions in which cross-party, closed or open, we've just looked frankly at where we are. And we can all recount, I think, a story of how different times show a judgment to being less acute with the value of the clarity, the only clarity we ever have in life, which is hindsight. But the objectives of this council, before my time really, I think 2017, 16 is when we confirmed the instinct that we could make some money, and we have. It was worth remembering that. We found some opportunities, and we've actually got, as set out in the paper here, and I know you recognise this, some very robust instances which do continue, and I think it's right that we acknowledge that as well. I would, if you won't mind me saying so, prefer not to use the word gamble as a lottery feel to this, but the point is taken that we need to have a very robust forward focus on risk and return, and we had to have a very sober view. I'm completely wedded to this in terms of what we should take into the forward budgets and when it comes to judging what is going to be genuinely available, what really can be counted upon. That needs to be conservative, small c, Paul, rather than optimistic for the sake of the comfort we have temporarily at that moment. So I just want to say we're in a similar place to you, and I really do thank you for your time and the support of your group for what we're doing here. We're not that far apart, I think, in the way in this will proceed. I'm happy to have that conversation again. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All I'd say is that, yes, it was actually, this started before my time as well. I know it seems longer to both of us, but on and off in my case, but we've both only been here about 5 years, I think. So, yeah.
Raise a glass to that when we leave. Thank you. Councillor Dennis Willis. Dennis, please.
Leader. As a long-serving councillor, I remember I was around at the birth of the companies, and I remember well the arguments that were put, whether we should do it, whether we shouldn't do it, what the risks were. And I must say, I was never wholly convinced that it was a good thing, but I'm always happy to go along with the majority view, which was that there were significant opportunities to having companies which were not hemmed in by some of the rules which normally governed local government operations, particularly emoluments paid to the staff, and that was a reasonably compelling argument. But there were strategic issues, and I think those strategic issues have finally come back to us, and we have to deal with them. If one stands back and looks at what has happened over the last 2 or 3 years, and it may have been COVID, I don't know, perhaps if we hadn't had COVID, the companies might have been in better form. But at the moment, CCHL is a set of really good people. They know their onions, they're well qualified, but they are desperately looking for something useful to do. And at the moment, that definition of usefulness between the council and the companies seems to be rather an ill-defined concept. And I think that is at the heart of the problems that we're dealing with at the moment. I think the relationship between the companies and the council is the most critical issue that needs to be dealt with, and the way it's developed means that it is not optimum, it's not optimized. Speaking as a backbencher, one of the lobby fodder leader, it is your job to run the council and take the executive decisions, and it is the role of we backbench councillors to hold you to account, to see what you're doing and ensure that it is always done in the best interests of the council taxpayer and the residents of the city. Now, my observation is that there are now 2 levels of obfuscation between what is going on in the companies and the backbench councillors. The companies operate within a degree of secrecy because they are dealing with commercial matters, which at times are difficult to disclose. Then there's a second level because, as has been complained by some of my colleagues on many occasions, and I'm not sure that my view is quite as strong as theirs, information doesn't always travel around the council as quickly as it could. So I have had a real difficulty understanding what the companies are doing, what they are achieving, whether it is good value for the taxpayer. And I would suggest at the end of this exercise, if it is possible, Leader, that we should have an assessment of how much the companies have cost us and just what value there is at the end of the exercise as you put these companies into slumber, hibernation. I would have described it as administration. If we look at the management fee, I could never understand the rationale of the management fee and the dividend. We pay the companies a very substantial management fee of some several £1 million, and we get a dividend back. We could pay them a greater management fee and get a bigger dividend, or we could judge the management fee that we pay just to cover the costs for the things that we want doing at our behest and have no dividend. And I've never been able to understand why it is we ask the company to accept a management fee which is more than we need, and at the end of the day get a dividend back. Just doesn't make sense to me. There are tax reasons as well, but fortunately those have been circumvented so that we've not been hit heavily by paying tax on the dividend paid back to the council. But they're just issues which were never really worked out, never understood, and are still not properly understood. If I quickly go on to the portfolio, which I find difficult to rationalise. Most companies have a major product or a major group of products, but our companies have such a diverse range of issues. It was recognised at the time that they were set up that the diversity of these issues would perhaps be their downfall, and I think it probably is. On the housing, I mean, in my ward there were 4 council houses built by Amphora Homes. They did it extremely well, but I would argue that it probably could have been done cheaper by a local builder without the overhead of the Amphora management. And they are never going to build at the rate, because the local government finance and the way the housing revenue account works is never going to permit them to build 300 houses a year. It just isn't possible to do that with the current company structure. We need partners, not wholly owned companies. If we look at the energy portfolio of these companies, it was a truly great idea. And at the time, it seemed to be placed into the market just to meet the rising tide of cheap green energy. But it turned out to be a tale of woe. Mile End is almost littered with boreholes which didn't find the geothermal layer which was necessary for the product to succeed. Eventually it did, and we ended up with an energy product which had defects about it, but it was there. But then we find that there were no customers, the hospital isn't proceeding, the houses that it was going to serve are not proceeding, with no customers. Really, your word of hibernation is a polite term for winding it up in its present state, and I guess that's what should be done. If we look at the third element of the portfolio, the trading areas, again, it's just too wide, the things that are going on, for it to be sensibly managed, Leader. If we consider the fibre network, the report before us, was it before Governance and Audit, said that the success was 500 customers and 80 businesses, but it was technically loss-making. But Leader, in the village that I live in, 8 Ash Green, we have more than 500 fibre customers with 1 gigabit per second service, and we don't have 80, but we must have about 40 small businesses which are using it. And that is on the outskirts, and replicated in West Burgolt, replicated in the Cols, replicated all over the place in the rural areas, yet in the town centre, there has been such slow progress in running out high-speed fibre. One thinks, just can it be? You know, why does this happen? So I'm not surprised that we have difficulties with the fibre network, given the penetration that has been achieved and what is being achieved by small companies like County Broadband in the rural areas. And then if I can comment on events. The events should have been one of the crown jewels, but it was selling space, and it was completely delinked from the maintenance of the assets that were being sold. So we have a very successful sale of space, say in the Moot Hall, but that was in no way linked to building up a reserve to deal with the roof. And now we have the lead breaking up, the roof damaged, and the asset is unusable. So again, it wasn't brought together in a logistical way that most businesses would do to ensure that the usage and the damage to the repair fund were intrinsically linked. There are other absolute howlers which have occurred and which should never have been permitted in the events company. I remember a charity event which I was involved with in Castle Park, where we wanted to use the bandstand, and as a charity we were charged £250 for the bandstand to allow Colne Valley Youth Orchestra to use it, plus £3 a chair for each of them to sit on, which was quite ridiculous for for a charity. We couldn't pay it, so the council gives us a grant of £500 to pay Amphora for overcharging the community for the assets that were being used. And again, this makes nonsense to me, so I'm not surprised that we have difficulties. I saw in a recent report, Leader, that the community stadium costing sort of £28.5 million was only giving a return of 176,000 a year and 0.6% return on capital. Yet the bandstand under Amphora was even worse value when charities tried to book it. So from the viewpoint of a backbencher, the companies have not worked. It's been too diverse. It's not been focused well enough. And I think the time has well and truly come to support your decision, which is to take most of these functions back under the direct control of the council, because firstly, it will be a better economic proposition, and secondly, we will be able to scrutinise and hold to account the way these functions are carried out in a much clearer and easier way than we are with the companies. So I fully support your decision. I am a little disappointed that many of the issues which were raised in the really early days, must be almost a decade ago when we were considering how the company should go, have in fact come true, and it has not been the great money earner that some of the pundits said it would be. But we have to do now what we have to do, and I fully support the recommendations in this paper. Thank you, Leader.
No, thank you, Dennis. Stay a second. I just want to acknowledge the depth of your personal engagement on that, the value that any administration, if it's wise, and I hope we've got just about enough wisdom, it places upon the independent view, the backbencher view, to use that phrase. You know this is genuine, the value we place upon you and other colleagues, sort of depth of inquiry, test and challenge. So thank you, first of all, is what I want to sort of say, and thank you for the breadth of your overview. Thank you for your conclusion. I think we could have an interesting debate about COVID and pandemic. I don't think there's any doubt that it accelerated changes that you could glimpse, and then made a huge disruption to existing plans for a possibility to a probability. And we will take away the points of learning from this. That is plain. That's what this is all based on. And if I could just mention a couple for me, which perhaps aren't clear, and that's the point about clarity. I think that the relationships, the pretense is a useful one sometimes, but the pretense that somehow it's all separate from the council, there is a very limited value in that. We're a family of organisations, and we have to, and we're getting there, have to think in the whole in terms of how we might avoid what doesn't make clear what we do, and how we ensure that there is insight and transparency, and I'm wedded to that, we are wedded to that, how we ensure we use our people as well as we can and provide them opportunities individually and collectively to make an impact. There are different people in the companies with different backgrounds, as many will understand, and there is a real place for them in the future organisation. I have no doubt at all that the balance here of the difficult, the uncomfortable, the absolutely important recognition of the quality of work and delivery places us well for our next steps. But I thank you again for your observations. Cabinet, can I ask if any wish to add some remarks to what's come through from the conversation to date? Mark.
Thank you. I thank those in the room, Richard and Alistair, and those working with the companies to get to this point. A lot of thought has gone into this and a lot of work and time, but it's been right to take that time to learn and to realise what we should do. And that's why we've actually got sort of two papers here, because we're talking about stopping functions, hibernating functions, continuing some as well. And Councillor Willits, just to come to you, you covered so much there. We don't always agree on things, but I did agree with quite a few of your comments there, and we absolutely have to hear those and listen to the learning. some might disagree with, but I think there's ups and downs, of course, in the risk of the market that we were working in as companies. But I think, as the leader said, take on board those comments, take this learning going forward, and move to the next paper and actually action this strategy. Thank you.
Thank you. I also, in the long list of thank yous, and they're genuine because it's an endeavour of years in the making, and has had many successes as well as the challenges described here. I want to thank the councillors and other members of the board. Martin, I can see Martin Warnes is here, so Martin, to you in particular, you've been frank when it's been important, and devoted to ensuring that the board has had the best of your attention. So I want to thank. I look across at other faces here. Now, a little generosity does no harm, but it's actually meant. So thank you very much for what you and your colleagues have done. Right, we have in front of us a decision to make. It's gone through the process described, through the board and through governance and audit, and independent assessment and advice. There's no lack of robustness to it. As described in item 2, do I have your agreement?
Agreed.
Thank you. We've touched on the next items, so we don't need, in my view, to have exactly the same conversation, but I do welcome the views of colleagues, and this time round, learning from past experience. When we talk about Colchester Amphora Energy, I'll ask Councillor Dundas, Paul, if you want to come up again, followed by Councillor Williams-Sunnucks. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader, and good evening again. I'm going to repeat myself a little bit from the last item, because I just wanted to sort of say that on an individual basis, I dealt with many of the people working on this project, and you know, they were hardworking and committed and believed in it. So, you know, I do feel for them on an individual personal basis, but unfortunately, you know, we live in a commercial world, and this is a commercial decision. Not everything works out. What I do just want to talk about is I know probably some of these details can be found sort of lurking in the papers, and I think I know some of the answers to some of them. But just for clarity and for your own benefit, really, as a cabinet, I just want to try and nail down a few of the figures we're actually looking at. I've been careful not to go into any of the commercially sensitive areas and just stick to what's sort of publicly available. Although, of course, as the company is being hibernated and becoming a dormant company, it's no longer operating commercially. So it's quite difficult to argue that any of it's commercial anyway. But it is public money, and I think the public have the right to know what's been spent. Now, the project started with a budget back in 2018 of 5.7 million. I think, in the original capital budget, which kept expanding. It was expanded to 6.5 million in March 2019, and then 8.552 million in November 2021. I'll be honest, looking back, I regret the expansion in 2021. It was backed by everybody, it was backed by the party. A good business case was made, and the Section 151 officer signed it off as a good commercial proposition. But I actually regret not sticking to my instincts that I should have called it a day then, and I think I let all of us, including myself, and I emphasise all, fall for the sort of sunk cost fallacy trap of thinking, well, we've got in this deep, we've got to carry on. I doubt any of you would have said nice things about us had we axed it then, but looking back, if we're honest with ourselves, it would have been the right decision. But my specific questions are just around, firstly, around the BIS or BEIS grant, which is 3.45 million, just to establish exactly what the status of that now is. So has it all been drawn down and spent? Have we anything in writing that we won't have to pay any of it back? And if it is still a potential liability, how much is that liability, and where is it sitting on the council's books? And equally, if we do have to pay it back, how are we going to do that, would be the final question on that section. Secondly, now the council, and it's in tonight's document, entered into a loan facility with CAEL of 2.25 million. and it's reported that around 1.35 million has been drawn down in various stages. So is that figure correct? And can we confirm in cash terms how much of CCC money was spent at CAEL? And then we come to the assets. Now, actually, in the published accounts, it shows assets, which I guess are bits of the heat plant and that, boreholes, are about 1.2 million. I can't remember the exact figure, but it's about that. And they're described as no depreciation or impairment applied because they are under construction. Now, they clearly are no longer under construction. Therefore, the value is clearly not 1.2 million. In fact, I would venture to suggest its actual market and realisable value is about naught. So how is that being accounted for, and where is that loss and impairment, that value, going to sit? Fourth, and there's only 5, don't worry, we know that CAEL, because it's in tonight's report, in the public report, were entering into contracts for equipment as far back as March 2021, and that we were told about 2 years ago that orders needed to be placed by March 22 in order to meet the deadlines of the Renewable Heat Incentive Income Scheme. Don't say that after a drink. So what these contracts, we think some were placed because there's a figure in tonight's report of around 195,000, but is that the full extent of everything? Are we confident that that's the only liability we've got relating to any contracts? And did any equipment actually turn up? Have we got some equipment sitting in a cupboard somewhere which turned up from a manufacturer? If we were placing contracts in March 21, I know there's a long lead time, but it's not impossible. And finally, really, just for everybody's benefit, could we put a round figure on how much money has actually been spent on the entire project between its inception in March 2017 and today, and again, the value we're placing on anything left over? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul. Certainly a lot of those are very fair questions. I think, to be honest, some of them I can find here. Some of them have been talked through on the journey to this place. You and I had the conversation about it. These are good points for the public record, so there's a conversation for us to have, I think, perhaps about whether or not we could have put yet more here. But as I say, in the round, this has been, as described here, and I hope you'd accept this, a very exhaustive process, and these kind of questions have been raised before. It's entirely appropriate to raise them here, given that we're testing, if you like, what's in front of us. So I look to those. I could give you 2/3, but that won't do. So Richard, would you like to work your way through those? And what we'll say, Paul, is if we omit any, and then we'll come back to you.
So I fear that I won't be able to answer every question tonight, but I would, and some of them actually, I think you need the advice of your 151 officer in terms of how best you deal with some of the implications in a way that best protects the interests of the council. And I don't say that to be dismissive, but it does go to your point about grants that have been received by the council. And we are in a public meeting, and therefore I feel a little bit constrained by what I would say by that. But if I might just comment on something that was raised earlier, which was about the issue of hibernation versus complete dissolution. And that isn't just about softening the proposal. That is a genuine proposition that is being put forward. And the rationale for that is that there might be a time in the future where the council concludes its interests lie in pursuing a scheme of this nature through the type of arrangement that KO represents. So it gives you the option at some stage in the future to resurrect that if that proved to be in the council's interest. And I think it is important to retain that option, to go to your point about minimising the risk of any grant being reclaimed. I'm inhibited about saying much more about that, but I hope you can understand. Yeah. But the detail of the actual financial transaction, I say again, that is something which the council's 151 officer is working on, and I feel somewhat handicapped in offering a view on that. Other than to say, I think there are two objectives in the way that transaction is handled. The first is to best protect the City Council's interests. The second is to ensure that there's no lingering liability on the part of those that have been directors of the company. And we do need to remember in that context that there will be, as part of the hibernation process, a requirement for a director to remain in situ. So I'm sorry I'm not answering every point that you're raising in the level of detail you might want. Some of that is because I don't want to compromise the council's position, and also because I think actually you need the advice of your 151 officer. I hope that helps a little.
I think it does. I think I can read between the lines on the grant aspect, and that perhaps reinforces why the hibernation plan is set up the way it is. I think the key thing is what's going to end up on the books, on the balance sheet of the council, and in terms of, there is a loss going to be there because we know that the money spent is not a realisable value. And it's how that comes onto the books, indeed whether there's potentially an MRP element or whether there's actually a loss element. And I think it's a shame actually the Section 151 officer isn't here, because I think as a cabinet, it's particularly bearing in mind the earlier conversation about the budget and pay and the strains we're under. I think it's important that you're very clear on the long-term consequences this has actually on the Colchester City Council's finances, not just the practicalities of putting CAL to bed or asleep, or what term you want to use. And I think that perhaps is something you need to try and clarify in your own minds, because it's not clear to me really, and I don't think it's been clear this evening.
Thank you, Paul, and thank you, Richard. And if the closed session later on allows us a little bit more clarity on some of those numbers, we'll do it there. But if not, we'll produce a note to sort of address those as we can. Can I just take 2 points of sort of commentary? The first is about the future. Well, let's go back over the ground as described at some length here and as talked through. I do keep saying this in several other places before we got to this point. We have to make a decision, and we have to do that, make that decision in a way that is as described, one that works best. But it has to be based upon the facts in front of us. So the facts in front of us are what they are, treatment of those facts. There's lots of conventions and rules around that, and we'll take the best course. But so much has succeeded, let's remind ourselves, you were generous enough yourself to acknowledge that. But here we have to accept where we're at. But hibernation and dormancy, technicalities to one side, accepts that there is a potential future. And this particular site, this particular investment, and the use of energy. Well, there's a whole conversation to be had, depending on the market of the time, the land, the uses of it. And I wouldn't want to extend anybody who pays an interest in what we do to be sending the message that the balance of what is actually in the round a successful development, Colchester does well attracting money in and making the most of its greatest asset beyond its people, which is its land and resources. We get to that in just a minute. So we'll see to some degree where the future is. What this paper does is what you urged earlier, that we are sober-minded, like learning from our experience. We won't need, but we'll always welcome your view, because we're in the same kind of place. So the paper reflects the reality of a more limited ambition, doesn't deny possibility, and it strikes that middle course. And we'll have to accept to the bottom line what those, what the consequences are, Paul.
Thank you, Leader. Just for clarity, I do support the proposal, so that's just for clarity. But yeah, I think, I mean, who knows what the future is going to bring, but we have to be honest with ourselves. We're putting it to bed quite deep sleep. So I think maybe 5-10 years down the line, who knows, different world, but it's not going to be happening in the near future. Let's be honest with ourselves.
Given that, thank you for your support for this decision, as earlier from Councillor Willis. It is welcomed. It's been a journey together, has it not? Richard, welcome to Colchester again. So, please feel free to stay there. Thank you very much. William, please. No, okay. Well, you were on a bromance yesterday, William. I thought it might be round 2. Obviously not. Thank you very much, though, for attending. Right, colleagues, any other contributions from any round the table? No? Okay. Well, look, we've given this a good walkthrough, and rightly so. Reflexes would acknowledge a year worth of some fairly intense business. The decisions and recommendations are set out here in the paper. Do I have your agreement?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. In which case we happily go on to yet another strand of the related piece, which is around asset management review and the adoption of the corporate landlord model. William, you're down for this one. Did you want to step forward on this and speak to this? Thank you.
Yes, you'll be pleased to hear that I support the corporate landlord model. And you will not be surprised to hear that I got one or two comments on it. When I heard that we were going down this route, I was really, really pleased. And I thought this is an opportunity to get benefits, get much more value out of the assets we own, and to bring expertise into one place, and to sort out the data, and to get some financial expertise onto it. So when this 41-page paper strategy appeared, with its layers of process and strategy and policy and objective, all meticulously devolved and related back to the objectives of the council, I was disappointed. And when I got to seeing that you're trying to make decisions on the future of assets with a RAG approach, a red, amber, green approach, which is so subjective, I just feel that we will run out of money. We will fail to use our portfolios as we should be doing. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about, this has been my job for years, a little bit about how it might be approached. We have in our accounts values for these properties. Whether they're right or wrong, we don't know. And supporting those accounts, we must have, because we know that we've given the auditors all the papers they need, we must have supporting valuation information. And I suspect that information is pretty poor. And the way that I've seen it before, the way this paper described the assets, it's broken down to land and buildings and other depreciation type categories. And what you must be showing to the auditors, otherwise they'll really struggle with it, is this is a property, forget whether it's land or buildings or plant, what's its value, what's its market value? There must be some type of appraisal there. And that information should be available to the auditors, should be available to the public. That could be a starting point. What is our book values? Have we got a breakdown of the properties by that? Incorporated in those valuations are assumptions about income and rent. And there we have our target. There we have what we should be getting to. And we should be saying, we should be having an understanding of what the market value, what the alternative uses are. Often it's not a market value, but what the alternative uses are and what the value is. And we should be seeing that we're making our cost of debts about 5%, our long-term cost of debt about 5%. We should be seeing 5% somewhere. We should be having some people with property and finance expertise looking at, it's big enough, 200 million is big enough to merit that. And we should be having someone that's people looking through that. A lot of this stuff should be in the public domain, it's public assets, and I think that the audit papers have to be in the public domain by law. So I'm not really asking for anything more than the valuations supporting the audit. And we then have a long list of properties, and we are striving for that 5%. And yes, we can talk about climate change and all the other objectives we've got. And in those valuations, you'll be seeing a lot of the other things that we've put into our RAG analysis. So you'll be seeing how much you need to spend on repairing the town hall roof, or the massive energy bills we suffer from at Leisure World. You'll see all of that will come together, and that will be the type of financial approach, the strategy that I would have hoped we would follow. And so please don't let's use subjective judgments, innumerate subjective judgments on a RAG analysis to actually make decisions. Please let's dig into it, focus on it, and do it properly.
William, thank you. I wouldn't use the words do it properly, because why wouldn't we do anything other than that? Back to our remarks yesterday, we are more focused than you might give us some credit for, but we have a public sector duty here, which complicates the way in which we can approach this, to be frank, and also the way in which we have to describe it, and the huge variety of stakeholders. Now, some of that can get in the way of, here I do see at least half a point in which we can meet in the middle, which is we have to be very focused. Back to all of the conversations we've had tonight, we have to be very, very, very steely focused on value, judgment, risk, and return. Now, this paper reflects the beginning of a process which there is nobody here wants to do anything other than as swiftly as we're able to. I thought I would give it more credit than you do, and the work behind it also. I'm absolutely clear that this carries a value and we should be content to endorse it. I'm absolutely equally clear that in some of the language that's used, in paragraph 5, which you turn to, some of that is for the public domain, help to talk about properties that are used for things, properties that are leased. Those were used for investment, and there'll be terms behind this you'll understand, what's surplus and so on. And we'll get to the attitude in a moment. But what I wanted to do, without making you look through countless pages with them, you're probably one of the few people who does, and good for you, I want to sort of play back to you that, of course, we have to do the kinds of things you have described. And I want that to be as open as possible, because why wouldn't we? We're setting off on a change of direction, frankly, and I think it's long overdue. I have very few beefs about anything, apart from being fair to people. I'm a terrible attitude, I shouldn't have. But the other one is this, because it's been almost impossible to understand what we have, what the condition is, where we're taking the right decisions on maintenance, and I should say for the record that the use of the Moot Hall has got nothing to do with its condition. That's up beyond the surface, you can see. But we should understand the condition, we should price what we've got, we should look after it. So we're at the turn and tilt point. This provides a foundation, from my perspective, bureaucrat, I'm sorry, but one with a bit of commercial experience too, a little bit. This is the tilt point and turn point, and the kind of language you've used is entirely appropriate in terms of understanding what we want for what. But that would include social value. So there will be decisions to be made which says we know we could get 5% for it, for example, but that would have a damage that we're not prepared to countenance. But the steps, and they are described here, are to understand what you have and sit for behind them. Understand what you have, understand what you're earning from it, if that's the appropriate term, understand the social value actually also, then make a considered decision, rather than at the moment, I will go on and on it, so I better stop, bundling it all together, because that doesn't make for good decision making. Sorry, I will say less about the whole of the paper later. You've drawn it all out of me, William. Anything you want to say in response?
Yes, I'm sorry to wind you up, and see I have. Just the social value is not an out from this process. You can put numbers around social value, and that's what we have to try to do. SIPFA were very clear in their report that we should charge arm's length rents to different parts of the family of companies, as you would say, and that would tell us where the costs lie. And I think that's a very, very important piece of advice to follow. So social value is not an out. It's definitely something a little more difficult to quantify than just some arm's length rent. But, don't let's give up on it and just go to RAG analysis, please.
I get that. I'll stay there, William, for a second. I'll just ask colleagues if we've got anything else we want to contribute. Mark.
Just thank you for your support. I think we're all quite excited about this model, and it will develop. This is the first step of going on that journey. And as we get further advice, bringing in people to work with us on this, we will continue to develop the strategy. So I hope that some of the questions you posed tonight and the scrutiny you'll see develop, and we will be sharper and sharper, and we will deliver for our residents social value, but also deliver higher sort of income. And when you talk about 5% yield, of course it will vary on different buildings and different projects. So where we can get the greatest yield, we will. We are doing this for a reason, and I'm glad you support the principle, and this is the first step, and hopefully we will deliver on some of that practice that you comment on today as well. Thank you.
William, I think we're almost there. So this is, we ought to perhaps just spell out the ... This will mean in the months and the next year or two, in my view, fast as we can, we come to decisions which at their most fundamental are, do you keep it? Do you use whatever it might be? Do you use it differently? Do you transfer? This has got to be, and based upon the things, the conversation we've just been had around value in a metricated way as far as we can. And no, not wound up about it, William. You've released my inner William here on this subject. Thank you. Right, colleagues, anything else from anybody else? Thank you, Mark, for reminding me what I always like to say and mean, which is really grateful for the huge amount of work that lies behind here. Mandy Jones in particular, but others as well. So Mandy, thank you very much indeed. And for all of the contributed to this. This is comprehensive and to be applauded. And the next steps, Mandy, no pressure. We'll need to scamper towards that at best sensible pace. So, colleagues, I'll be content to endorse the paper. Thank you very much. And I think we get to housing next. But we're having I'm just going to say, we're going to have a break. We've passed our normal time, which we break around 90 minutes or so. So it's just gone 25 to 8 for all those holding on. Thank you very much for doing that. We will come back here, please, and start afresh at 1:45. Thank you all very much. Size from the recording, okay. All right, everybody. If we could come back to those who are to issues. So, as an issue of record, before we jump, as I just did before the break, to item 9. I just ought to acknowledge that we have withdrawn a paper, which is the Officer Pay Policy Statement for 2023-34, I have to say. This will be submitted, thank you, to the meeting of the Cabinet in January 24, and by which time we'll be able to take account of the learning from the current pay rounds of negotiation, and we would look to reflect that in that document, including the direction we talked about in terms of it is our collective hope, I think, that we can at some stage reconcile with the national rates and the national pay process. So thank you for that, for the record, in which case Andrew Weaver, as monitoring officer, will allow me to go to item 9. Thank you so much. Okay, so item 9.1 addresses Housing Ombudsman's reports. I don't think, have we got any speakers? No. We have no have your say. So what I'll do, members of the Cabinet, Martin, is to walk through some of the key points and then invite you to offer supplementary views. This is in the this I hope will be helpful. Thank you. And this is in the absence, I'm reminding myself, of Councillor Paul Smith. Okay, all right. So this addresses, and it really does matter, 2 recent reports by the Housing Ombudsman in relation to Colchester Borough Homes, and very pleased to have here the Chief Executive of Colchester Borough Homes. In fact, 3 Chief Executives in one evening. How grand we are, the family demonstrated by its leadership, forced into the same room as Cabinet. So, Philip, I want to just sort of say, before I go into the detail of this report, that members of the Cabinet will understand the personal attention of you and your senior leaders to the issues that are described in this paper. And you've been very forthright about accepting of the challenges that you have, which are described here, and very much on the issues and ensuring that they get the time and attention that they deserve, because we as a council have a deep responsibility for delivery of service in every respect, including so fundamental housing. So I'll go to the report findings as described here. I don't want to go through the individual evidence piece, that's been aired before we come to this point. But as you'll see here, we have a duty, the monitoring officer has to report to us if a decision or omission gives rise to maladministration. This report concerns omissions that the Housing Ombudsman has determined in 2 reports, one of which is the finding maladministration, the other severe maladministration. And let's just be frank, despite the fact we describe in this paper the reality that across the board, there is a deeper focus upon here and a whole variety of evidence and data that tells us, you could say, actually we're doing well compared to many, and that many others in a more difficult position. None of us here would want to discount the challenge for the individuals affected, who have to go through a very lengthy process. We need to remind ourselves before they get satisfaction. So this report describes the issues, describes the Ombudsman's findings, and I think most important in paragraph 613 onwards, describes the reaction of the organisation and the steps that have been taken since. So in reviewing policy, how services are delivered, training for staff, the audit of casework, kinds of steps that a good organisation takes that ensures it minimises, very hard to avoid completely, it minimises the risks that are described here and that lie behind the reports drawn to attention by the monitoring officer. I'm going to ask colleagues if they have any comments they would want to make.
Thank you, David. Just one point I wanted to flag, and not that I want Philip necessary to answer, but just to hear. I think the comments on antisocial behaviour, I think we all understand that's an issue, whether in council properties and rented properties or in our streets, no matter what. And it's about the responsibility of individuals and how they should take more care and respect of others. I absolutely get. But I've just seen that some of the processes are completing now, November this year. And I just wanted to sort of get clarification and be sure that I know the issues with antisocial behaviour. I think one of our colleagues, Councillor McSpindler, has probably talked to you about that, his evidence of it, and he's one of the members of your board. I just wanted to clarify that you are on top of that, and the process has been a positive one at understanding your ASB review that you've done. If you just wanted to talk to that, then I'd very much welcome 1 minute of your time just to tell us about that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Philip. You know this table well. Feel really welcome, as always.
Thank you very much. And I mean, just very briefly, in terms of the general position and the specific question, from CBH's perspective, it is very disappointing to have received 2 findings, one of maladministration, one of severe maladministration. Also, just to stress, though, that the actions agreed with the Ombudsman have been delivered, and to provide assurance that we have learned lessons. Specifically in terms of antisocial behaviour, the actions taken in response to the Ombudsman findings, they were delivered, I think it was on the 28th of August, the specific actions were recommended by the Ombudsman. They have now been delivered since that date. That has included policy review, training. It's been a lot of work, but it's been within that period since the Ombudsman determination was received at the end of August. So we've moved at pace to implement them.
Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Philip, again, please, you're welcome to stay at the table, because the reports that follow are also about housing, so feel free to stay if that suits you. Thank you very much indeed. I want to put on the record as well, although we have to close this item, let's do that first. So we've been informed of the contents of the report by the Housing Ombudsman. We have to note the contents of the report and the actions taken. Are we content?
Yes.
Right. Then I want to go on and just say, Philip, thank you, that as described elsewhere, and we'll get to this, we, Cabinet, Paul Smith as our lead representative, his shadow counterparts and others, absolutely recognise, and I want to say, greet Esme Cole in the back as the chair, but I know, Esme, this is a choice for you also to be here, but thank you. You, collectively, are on the case as best as you and we can together to address what is a tide of challenge. You know, it's not unfair to use the word crisis, given all its component parts, and we'll touch on that later on. So, you know, this takes sustained grit and dedication by a lot of people who are under a huge amount of pressure. So, to you and yours, you know, we see this, and I see other colleagues in the background too. We recognise, so we have to take this, we take it seriously, and we know you do, but we also see alongside it that context of intense pressure and demand, and frankly those kind of challenges are going to lead us to get some things wrong. So that's not the issue. The issue is how we respond to it, and this would appear to be on the money, accepted, taken on the chin, sorted, and learning taken. So thank you very much. As I say, I'm very happy you stay there if you are. Right, well, that's 9.1. In which case, curiously, we go to 9.2, which is viability assumptions and affordable rent on new build council housing. Let me make just points, invite some others, and then Philip, if there's anything you wanted to add in addition, then I'd welcome that before we go forward. So, sorry? Okay. So we're all agreeing there's no speakers. Right, so as described in the paper, what we've got here is, and we do have, right, so I beg your pardon, I'm going to ask Councillor Julie Young, and then I've got Councillor William Sunix to come forward. So I'm going to stop there. Thank you, Philip, my apologies. Make it back and forth. It's just our whim and pleasure in Cabinet. Julie, please.
Thanks very much. I think the crisis we have in housing is probably the worst it's ever been here in Colchester. I think it's 318 people in temporary accommodation now. We've had spikes of problems in the past, but not on this scale. So I really welcome this paper, and it gives us a chink of light about how we can start recovering the situation in Colchester and giving some hope to people that there might be the possibility that they might get a home with us. So I know that will be really well received by housing colleagues. It's a real shame that Paul isn't here tonight to speak to this paper. But I think consecutive portfolio holders for housing has really grappled with this dilemma we have to get people into homes, because we know what a difference that makes to the life chances of our residents. I'll be interested to hear what Councillor Sunnox has to say. I know he's spoken on housing in the past, and we've had conversations about the gravity of the situation, but I hope the Cabinet do adopt the paper this evening.
Thank you very much indeed, Julie. William, please.
Yes, this is a case of babies and bathwater. I support the idea of using affordable rent in the appraisals. I support the idea of charging that up to the limit of housing benefit. That seems to be a sensible and even entrepreneurial move from Colchester City Council, so great. Stapled to it is the adoption of some appraisal assumptions that I think are absolutely disastrous, and I'll go into them in detail when in the Part B bit, because they are, for some reason, I can't see why they need to be confidential, but for some reason they are. But just to say that if we invest our money on those sort of appraisals, we will run out of money, and we are running out of money, and we've got to get better at how we do these things. There's some other things that I can say in the public domain that are worrying. The first is that it says in there that where projects are unviable, the portfolio holder is approving them, despite them being unviable. So that seems to be worrying. I don't know whether that's subject to call in. Hopefully it is. But we seem to be, when we do it and it doesn't work, we seem to be ignoring it. And I also wanted to ask, this is a genuine question, when do we look at, we've got to have a credible 30-year business plan for our housing revenue account. Do we do that? Have we got it? And are we compliant with it? And there's lots of nods, so that's very encouraging. And the next thing is it going to be in the public domain? It is in the public domain, that's encouraging. And the last point, and you knew I'd say it, is why on earth, with so much public money being spent, can't we see those appraisals? And I feel we need to be testing that with freedom of information and appealing it if necessary. It seems to be absolutely in the public interest that those appraisals are in the public domain. And I think that's all I want to say for now, but I'd like to come back in Part B if I may.
Thank you, William. I'll just acknowledge that while you're the chair, in case you want to come back to us. Certainly the approach, it's good to hear first of all agreement, so let's just stay with that. It's lovely to hear, I agree, coming down the table. More of that, the better. But the challenge, we've talked about this in this place and elsewhere, always willing to have that challenge. I would just say, and I will say it again, that there has to be a balance between the insights any member thinks and they may be able to bring, and sometimes can, and the challenge to the organisation that's got a huge amount to do and has to serve the administration and the process of business. That's not to say no to disclosure, it's not to say no to transparency, it's not to say no to challenge, it's just to accept that some of this is proportionate. I'm happy to take away, again, offline, a conversation with the right people about whether there's more we can do here. I'm pleased to hear some nods around the table about some things that you might be concerned about not being visible, being visible. And as I say, perhaps I'll stop at that point. Thank you. Right, Cabinet members, before we go round the paper and purpose, anybody who wants to offer a particular view at this point in Paul's absence, we know he would talk with some passion and real knowledge. He has a finance background. He loves numbers more than some do. But they are, of course, an essential underpinning for this equation, and that's a point that's been fairly made by Councillor Sunnock. So, Mark, I think you want to say something.
Thank you. Yes, it's a shame Paul can't be here, but he had a pre-booked voyage, and he has been very passionate in this role and passionate about working out how we can deliver more council homes for the people who are in desperate need of them out in our communities, and working with a passionate staff within the Colchester setting, both in Colchester Council and in CBH, always looking at how we can work around some of the difficult policies and some policies I would disagree with at the national level, but trying to work out how we can deliver better for our residents. And Philip, I really appreciate you coming the other day to explain to some of our councillors, and I'm sure you'd offer that to other councillors, how this particular policy change will work, but also all the other pressures on housing as well. And for the disagreements I have on housing, at least today we've seen in the autumn statement, I think some small relief with the housing, local housing allowance, which will have some impact and actually some impact on this policy. So I just wanted to say we are absolutely on top of the HRA business case, and it changes when government policy changes. We have to look at when they cap rents or whatever, and how that will affect and how we can either extend, so to speak, our kind of debt and build more, or if we can't because we've got projected lower income coming in from rent. So we're always looking and monitoring how we can stretch the money we've got in the HRA to build more council homes. This policy allows us to strike a balance between getting in rent from our tenants, but also strategies to get more money to build more houses. I think we need more housing for our population, so this is a pragmatic way of ensuring we're protecting our stock and trying to expand it as much as possible, making sure our expansions are viable in the future. And I think perhaps what William was alluding to before is the decision that a cabinet member has to look at. Do we provide more housing? How viable is it? Is it on balance viable or not? And sometimes we do have to look at saying we desperately need more housing at this point in time. Will it pay back, or will we have to look at changes like this to ensure it does pay back? So this is about assuring the viability of projects going forward. So I wholeheartedly back this. I think I've covered everything. Just absolutely go back to, we are facing a housing crisis across the country, and it's very acute here. It is having an effect on families, the no-fault eviction, that needs to be sorted by national government. It has not been, they're delaying on that. We need that sorted because people are being chucked out of their homes. And we are seeing thousands, just over 1,000 this year presenting as homeless. We can't deal with that without support. So this is one small change. We need more support. I would say we need a moratorium on right to buy for some point to enable us to get back with our council homes, but that's a whole bigger debate. Thanks for this paper to all those who worked on it, and I wholeheartedly agree with it.
Thank you very much. I'll just a couple of remarks. I'll ask Philip. Thank you. I've got an answer to a question, but I will give Philip an opportunity if he wants to add some capping remarks, if you like. So look, the paper is quite a lot in here, a lot of detail behind it, but the essence has been described. This is by ensuring, as Mark and indeed William acknowledged, that the relationship of rent to the local housing allowance makes properties much more affordable. That's the simple essence of it. But this whole equation has to work. So let me address the whole equation piece. This is rightly, well, I want to go back a bit. My personal view is that the HRA has not had the collective attention that it deserves for the enormity, if you look at it in number terms, of assets and values. It's not to say it hasn't been dealt with, but I think it deserves more attention. That's work's underway and is coming to us, I understand, through with governance and audit involvement, mid-December. My personal view is, in the forward schedule on these things, and of course we have, we need to remember we've got a board structure too, so there are several layers of test and challenge before it comes here, but collectively we've got to pay more attention. That needs to be more transparent. We need to do what we're trying to do elsewhere as an executive, ensure that information and conclusions are capable of being explained to the public. And I think the public would be challenged, and members sometimes are challenged by understanding what is often intense information. I won't say more on that, but the direction heading is one where we will see more visibility on HRA, more testing on it as a whole. We will have greater assurance as a result, because at least we will know after that test and challenge where we stand better than I think could be articulated well today. But I just want to spend a couple of minutes just on that crisis point. We've got some data here, all data is an extract. But looking at the actual pipeline, the pipeline of challenge, if you look back just a couple of years, so prevented homeless, 187 2 years ago, 209 now. Relieved homelessness has gone down slightly, but I believe that's because there's huge work and effort going into persuading people to take people on their sofa, to stay at home. I've had some of those conversations myself. Don't present yourself. That's what that represents. Huge work to avoid that. And then you've got households in temporary accommodation, which we know has only gone way up. So I've got 4 or 5 indicators. They're all going, all but one of them are going, frankly, as Carol Lohman will know, she's in the background there, in the wrong direction. Look, I'll stop at that. Any other comments? If not, I should go to Philip, and then we'll draw us to a close. Philip, is there anything you'd like to add to what's been said today?
Thank you, Councillor King. Just to stress that what the proposals are in terms of the development appraisal assumptions, they're more robust development appraisal assumptions, but they're more challenging, but they reflect the market, and that will support ongoing effective financial management and planning. In doing that, it would mean that building new homes or acquiring homes at social rents would not be viable. As you've rightly mentioned, we have a housing crisis. An option is to charge affordable rents, which means that schemes can be viable and can be part of the solution that's been said to help us tackle the housing crisis. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Philip. Martin.
Yeah, it's just a question on, obviously it's good to have the rents laid out, and I think the policy is good. Where does the management charge sit? So for instance, where we charge tenants for services in shared communal areas or gardening, that's an extra charge on top of the rent, I'm guessing, so the tenant will have to find that in addition to obviously the housing benefit maybe covering, or is it included? And then the second question I've got for you, which is possibly a bit left of field but quite important. We've obviously been in discussions with some tenants about the quality of gardening currently being done by ID Verdi. That sits under me. And one of the issues has been that tenants are actually happy to pay more potentially for a better service, and actually tenants are quite happy to pay for that. But what I understand is, although we might then increase the contract price for ID Verdi, that doesn't get passed on to tenants for 2 years, which I was a bit surprised about. So it means if we improve service and we put it into the contract, and we as or you as CBH are paying for that, your tenants or our tenants don't then see that in their increased rents or management charge for 2 years, which I found a bit odd. So I thought, as you were here, I'd throw that in because it is actually related to what people are paying. So if you don't know the answer, don't worry, we'll take it up offline, but I just thought it was an important point to raise. Thank you.
Thank you. In terms of the first point, service charge is included in the affordable rent. We are not allowed by the rent standard set by the regulator to add it on top. What that means though is we have to be a bit careful as to the level of service charge, and what we do is we factor that into the appraisal so that we make sure that it is still viable. And on the second point in terms of ID Verdi, the approach will undoubtedly be in line with the policy, but I'm happy to take that offline and just review that if that's acceptable.
Philip, thank you very much indeed. If there's nothing else from colleagues, then I ask that we go to recommendations. Are we content?
Agreed.
Thank you very much indeed. We're at the end of the open agenda. We could take the steps we do. Oh, I beg your pardon, we've got one more. And you were going to talk to this, Andrew.
Thank you, Leader. So this item is for the nomination for Deputy Mayor for 24-25. Just to remind Cabinet that the convention is that the nomination for Deputy Mayor is rotated between the main political groups, with the next longest serving councillor being nominated should they wish to take on the role. You'll recall the current Mayor is Conservative, the current Deputy Mayor is a Liberal Democrat, and consequently the nomination for 24-25 should come from the Labour group. So the Labour group has nominated Councillor Mike Lilly, who has served 14 years on the council and whose nomination has been consented to by all groups. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much. Mark Corey.
I very much support this. I think Mike has been an excellent colleague over the years on the Cabinet as well, and represents, or did represent, Roe Hedger, a neighbour of Wivenhoe across the water. And I think he's got good experience of going around the communities of Colchester. One thing I would say is get used to lots of punk bands and things that I've never heard of coming through speakers at the mayoral events. Thank you.
Thank you. If there's no other, Martin, please.
Yeah, I have to say, Mike is just liked across the chamber and by all groups. I think he's just very straight, he's very honest, he tells you how it is, and I'm sure he'll chair in a quite unique style when it comes to his taking over of the mantle. And if I'm still around, I look forward to it, and I'm sure the meetings will be done with much brevity.
Right. Anything else from anybody else? If not, then I'm just pleased to add my support to those words of appreciation. It will be refreshing. Let's see where it all goes. It's lovely having somebody who just speaks as he sees it. It will be great fun to have him there, and in the year afterwards to head to being our new mayor. Right, we are content. We support. Note. All right. Thank you very much indeed. Right. Now we cease our public business, saying to the public that, because it can be misunderstood, that the huge majority of business is published, open, transparent and accessible like us, but there are some things that we do take to one side for an open conversation. So the Deputy Council Leader's duty now.
Thank you, Leader. I move that in accordance with Section 100A(4) of the Local Government Act 1972 and in accordance with the Local Authorities Executive Arrangements, Meetings and Access to Information, England Regulations 2012, the public, including members of the press, be excluded from the meeting for the following items as they involve the likely disclosure of the exempt information as defined in paragraph 3 of Part 1 of Schedule 12A to the Local Government Act 1972. So we do have to agree that motion. Are we agreed?
Agreed. Colleagues are very welcome to stay, but if they can think of, and they probably can, a dozen reasons why they want to go home, including red wine and a large glass, then feel welcome. So there we are. Okay.